Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Unlock the Power of Nature, CBD, and Functional Mushrooms for Wellness. My name is Robin Pierce, and I'm the Senior Brand Manager at LASA OMS. This presentation demystifies CBD and functional mushrooms, giving you the science-backed knowledge to make informed recommendations. Our webinar presenter, Ivori Zvorsky, is the Senior Scientist at Charlotte's Web. She holds a Ph.D. in Clinical Psychology from the University of Vermont and specializes in behavioral pharmacology. Her experience includes research roles at Johns Hopkins University's Behavioral Pharmacology Research Unit and Canopy Growth Corporation, where she studied the therapeutic potential of cannabinoids and terpenes, contributed to product development, and designed protocols for clinical trials. Today, Ivori applies her expertise to develop science-driven formulations that enhance well-being. Before we get to the presentation, let's just take a moment to acclimate to the webinar room. To the bottom right of the screen, you'll see two tabs, Questions and Chat. To connect with other attendees or notify us of any difficulties, please use the Chat tab. At the end of the presentation, we'll use the Chat tab to post a promo code specific to this event. If you have any questions for Ivori, please use the Questions tab. Your questions will be answered at the end of the lecture during our Q&A session. Please note that each webinar is recorded, and immediately following the conclusion, you'll receive a link to view the video on demand, a copy of the slides, and a promo code to use on your next order at LASA OMS. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Ivori.
Thank you so much, Robin. Really appreciate that introduction. So before we get started, just want to say hello to everyone and remind you all I'm happy to answer any questions at the end, but feel free at any point to throw things in that question tab. But I probably will not pay attention to that to the very end, just so I can stay focused on the presentation. So with that in mind, Robin already went over this. This is just my credentials and background. I'm so excited to chat with you all today about Charlotte's Web, about CBD and mushrooms, and really get into the thick of it. So before we get started, this is just a disclaimer that this presentation is for informational and educational purposes only, just to give that disclaimer before we get started. So we've got a lot to cover today. I'm going to be talking a lot. I hope you all are excited and ready to learn. So first, the first thing that we'll be talking about is doing a broad overview of cannabidiol, or CBD, and talking about relevant research associated with CBD. Next, we'll go over key mushrooms and relevant research. I narrowed it down to 3 commonly used mushrooms. Otherwise, we would be here for hours and hours. Then briefly, we'll go over Charlotte's Web products and finally wrap up with when to choose which formulation. So CBD versus mushrooms. I know that it's a huge question that comes up very frequently. So we'll be covering that and kind of walking you through questions to ask your patient. And then finally, at the end, we'll open it up for the Q&A. So let's get into it for CBD. So hemp contains many different chemical compounds. Cannabinoids are frequently seen in hemp, and there have been over 120 that have been identified. So when I say cannabinoids, most of you are probably thinking about the 2 most popular, THC and CBD. However, there are a bunch of other minor cannabinoids like CBN, CBG, THCV, just to name a few. And I say over 120 have been identified because science is still exploring that, and new cannabinoids are still being identified. Beyond cannabinoids, there are also many other chemical compounds that are found in hemp, such as terpenes. And to date, over 200 terpenes have been identified in the hemp plant, with the most commonly occurring ones being myrcene, beta-caryophyllene, limonene, and linalool. So quickly, just to explain the difference between CBD and THC, because they are the 2 most popular cannabinoids that you'll hear talked about, the most heavily researched, the most prevalent. Just want to go over some of the key differences. So when you look at the molecular structure of CBD versus THC, they are very similar. Looking at the 2 diagrams up on the screen right now, you see virtually no difference. However, they have very different effects. So CBD is non-intoxicating, meaning you're not going to feel high, versus THC, which is intoxicating. So that's the cannabinoid that gives those euphoric effects. Also, importantly, CBD acts on different receptors compared to compared to THC. So when you're looking at the cannabinoid receptors, CBD has a very weak affinity for CB1 and CB2, where THC is a partial agonist for both of those receptors and acts more strongly on them. So what is CBD? I've been kind of giving you a broad intro into it, but let's get into the meat of it and walk you through what CBD means when I'm referring to it. So CBD is a phytocannabinoid, meaning it's a cannabinoid that's found in the hemp plant that is found primarily in the flowers and leaves of the plant. And what I really want to spend some time talking about is the difference between full spectrum, broad spectrum, and CBD isolate. So these are all terms that you will see thrown around, and it can get really confusing about what that means. So full spectrum, I always think of it is the full kind of snapshot of what you would find in the hemp plant. So what that means is it is all of the phytochemicals that are naturally found in the plant. So all of the cannabinoids, all of the terpenes, all of the flavonoids, all of the amazing things in the hemp plant are present in full spectrum hemp extracts. So that also includes those trace amounts of THC. Broad spectrum is almost everything. So it is still containing almost all of the cannabinoids, containing terpenes, containing flavonoids. The difference for broad spectrum is that THC is processed out almost completely. So you're getting still many of the benefits of the hemp plant without that THC on board. And then finally, we have CBD isolate. So CBD isolate means it is only CBD. So you're not going to get any of the other hemp compounds. So no other cannabinoids, no other terpenes, no other flavonoids. It's basically 100% pure CBD. So I wanted to go over that because as we're talking about different products, it sometimes can get confusing about what is going on for them. So full spectrum, everything you find in the plant. Broad spectrum, everything except THC, and then CBD isolate just being CBD in isolation. So to talk a little bit about CBD research, as you can see here, CBD has been heavily researched and there are a lot of promising findings when you look across the body. So CBD has been shown to be helpful for epilepsy, for anxiety. It's being researched for autism and other rare developmental disorders, schizophrenia, Parkinson's, the list goes on. So in order to not have this presentation go on for days, we're going to primarily focus on the three circled sections here. So we're going to be talking about anxiety and stress, inflammation and pain, and sleep. So to briefly go over the CBD research for pain and inflammation, what I'm going to be focusing on for animal research is primarily focused to thinking about exercise related recovery in rodent models. So CBD has been shown to reduce inflammation and promotes muscle growth, repair, and development. So this is all in those rodent or preclinical models. CBD also inhibits oxidative stress and influences cortisol release, which are all really important factors for muscle recovery. So thinking about being able to bounce back after a tough workout. When we take that animal research and translate it to humans, there is also a lot of support for CBD in the context of exercise recovery. So there was a systematic review of 28 randomized controlled trials, and that study found that cannabinoids significantly improved pain relief, physical functioning, and sleep quality compared to placebo in chronic pain patients. So this one is looking a little bit even beyond exercise recovery, but also looking broadly at chronic pain. And other studies have shown that CBD reduces ratings of pain intensity and interference and improves exercise performance and reduces ratings of soreness after a tough workout. So overall, what we're seeing here are anti-inflammatory properties, helping with pain relief, and also those ratings of the intensity and interference of pain when it is occurring. So looking at the research for CBD and stress, again, starting with the rodent models, CBD has been shown to reduce anxiety and stress behaviors across a number of models. So if anyone is really into rodent research, they looked at elevated plus maze models, predator exposure, and some other different ways to tap into anxiety and stress in rodents. Single dose studies and repeated administration studies have shown CBD's anti-stress effects in those rodent models. So what that means is single dose is just giving CBD one time and seeing what happens. Repeated administration, administering CBD repeatedly, so over a period of time, and seeing what happens there. So both in the acute and more repeated administration, we're seeing those effects. Turning to human research related to stress, CBD has shown reduced ratings of anxiety at 300 milligrams. So 300 milligrams seems to be this magic number, especially for social anxiety. However, we will note that at those higher doses, you may also get some sedative effects. So you may start to feel a little bit sleepy. 25 to 75 milligrams of oral CBD has also resulted in decreased anxiety symptoms within 1 month. And that reduction remained steady throughout 3 months. So this is, again, was done in a repeat administration study. People taking 25 to 75 milligrams of CBD over the course of a month saw those reductions in ratings of anxiety, and that's remained through that 3-month study. Other studies have looked at 30 milligrams of full spectrum CBD oil. So again, full spectrum meaning everything found in the hemp plant, and saw clinically meaningful reductions in anxiety within 1 week, so pretty immediate, and then also throughout 1 month as they continued to take that product. And then finally, a lower dose has also been studied of like an average daily dose around 17.2 milligrams, and improvements were noted in general well-being, anxiety, sleep, and pain compared to placebo. So all of this to say, it does seem that CBD helps with those feelings of stress and anxiety, and there's a range of doses that may be helpful. So 300 milligram is great in those social anxiety settings. However, you may get some side effects from that, but we're seeing a lot of promise with these lower doses, that 25 to 75 milligram range. And then finally, for CBD, we can talk also about sleep. So starting with those rodent models, animal studies have highlighted a potentially complex relationship with sleep. So there's not like a clear-cut linear dose-response relationship, meaning it's not going to be like, if you take this much CBD, it'll help with sleep. If you take even more, it's going to help even more. There's a little bit of a complication there. It's not as clear-cut. However, CBD administration has been shown to increase total sleep time in the mid to high doses and decrease latency to sleep, so time to fall asleep, at a mid dose in these rat models. So while it's a complex relationship, it seems like in those rodent studies, a middle of the road dose seems to be helpful for sleep. So translating that over to humans, what we have shown and what we have seen is that sleep problems are a primary reason for use of CBD. So this is something you may have seen with some of your patients. They come in and say, I can't sleep, I've been taking CBD, or I would like to take CBD. So in one study, 43% of users reported sleep as their motivation for consumption. And this was like a large scale survey that was conducted. And nearly half of the CBD consumers who were using it for sleep reported sleep-related benefits. So digging a little bit further, another study examined commercially available CBD products and found that about half of the participants experienced clinically meaningful improvements in sleep disturbance scores over 4 weeks. And this was regardless of CBD type, so whether they were using full spectrum, broad spectrum, or even isolate. Another study looked at a low dose of CBD, so 15 milligrams, and compared it to 5 milligrams of melatonin, and found no statistical difference in sleep quality improvements between the CBD and melatonin groups. And then finally, just want to call back to that anxiety and stress research we just walked through. CBD's anxiolytic properties may also indirectly benefit sleep, as anxiety and sleep problems have a bidirectional relationship. And I'm sure in talking with patients or even in our own lives, we can think about that and how if we're feeling super stressed, we may not be feeling like we're getting great sleep. And if we're not getting great sleep, we're more likely to feel stressed. So with all of this in mind, I do want to cover CBD safety quickly. So extensive safety work has been conducted on CBD as a dietary supplement. And before I even talk about dosing, this is a disclaimer that the below dosing assumes these are people using CBD on their own. So they're not working with any practitioners or healthcare professionals. They're just going into their local store and getting CBD. Higher limits do apply with physician oversight. So just want to say that this is all intended for the average user who's just going out and buying CBD in the store or online. So acceptable daily intake. So if we are looking just broadly at the general population, everybody, including children, the acceptable daily intake is 0.43 milligrams per kilogram daily. When we look at upper intake limits, so the max amount that we'd recommend people taking, there are two numbers you'll see here. So the first is for all healthy adults. We recommend no more than 70 milligrams per day. So again, this is generally all healthy adults. We have a different number, a little bit higher number for healthy adults who are not trying to conceive, who are not pregnant, or are not currently lactating. So if you're not anywhere on the fertility journey, you can take more CBD at 160 milligrams per day. So rule of thumb, generally 70 milligrams per day for adults. And then if you're not conceiving, pregnant, or lactating, 160 milligrams. And again, this is all without physician or practitioner oversight. And finally, for CBD, it's important to talk about potential drug interactions. So CBD acts on lots of receptors and pathways. I talked a little bit about CB1 and CB2 receptors, but did not get into all the other myriad receptors and pathways in which it acts on, because that would be a lot of information. But knowing that it acts on a lot of different receptors and pathways, there's going to be a lot of overlap with many of the common pathways for different pharmaceuticals. So here's a snapshot. This is an example. This is not an exhaustive list, but just to give you a sense of things to be on the lookout for. And many of these interactions are not what I would consider catastrophic. It just may mean that you need to tweak dosing. So in order to get the CBD effects, you may need to increase CBD, or you may need to increase the drug itself. All of that is true for most of the things on this list, except for prescription blood thinners. So CBD is a vasodilator and makes the blood basically like even thinner. So it's opening up your blood vessels and may make the blood even thinner if you're taking it alongside with a prescription blood thinner. So this obviously increases serious risk like bruising or uncontrolled bleeding. So that one is a very serious drug interaction. Just want to call that out here. We always recommend checking in with a physician or other practitioner if someone's interested in taking CBD and they are on the blood thinner. So now that we have done a crash course around CBD, let's chat about mushrooms. So just for an overview, for those who may or may not be familiar, these are the different parts of a mushroom, and you'll hear these terms thrown around a lot. So fruiting body basically includes everything that you see above the soil. So you'll see that listed here with like the cap, the stipe, everything that grows above ground or off of the substrate. The substrate is what the mushroom is growing in or on, depending on the mushroom that you're talking about. And then the mycelium are sort of how I think about it is like they're like the roots. So if the mushroom were a tree, the fruiting body would be like the trunk and the branches, and then the mycelium would be like the roots underground. So key compounds in mushrooms. So very similar to the hemp plant, mushrooms, I would just say broadly that research is ongoing and we are still learning and trying to catch up with traditional medicine in the research perspective. I will call out polysaccharides seem to be the compounds that have a particularly high amount of benefit for people. And within polysaccharides in that group broadly, which is a type of chemical compound found in the mushrooms, what you'll hear talked about probably the most frequently are beta glucans. So this diagram over on the left-hand side of the screen is just really up here to point out all of the different polysaccharides that exist, and all of the research is exploring these different polysaccharides. However, the most heavily researched right now are those beta glucans. So I want to go over 3 major mushrooms today, and the first that we'll be talking about is lion's mane, and I'll be talking about lion's mane in the context of cognition and brain health. So similar to CBD, I'm going to run through those animal research studies and then finish out with human research. So for animal research, preclinical studies have shown the neuroprotective and neuroregenerative effects of lion's mane. And these studies have looked at specific compounds within lion's mane called polysaccharides, as well as 2 types of terpenoids. So neuroprotective, meaning protecting your brain, and neuroregenerative, helping to repair. When we translate this over to human research, clinical studies have primarily focused on cognitive health within participants with cognitive impairments and degenerative diseases. So thinking like Alzheimer's, things like that. However, there is research coming out looking at people without any impairment or just kind of more general population. So in one of these studies, it was conducted in older adults without cognitive impairment, and lion's mane supplementation resulted in improvements on a mental status examination, so like overall brain well-being. In healthy adults, a single dose of lion's mane improved performance speed on the Stroop task, which is a cognitive task that you have to say either the color of a word or the word itself, and you're like competing responses because you're switching back and forth, and it's actually quite challenging. 3 studies have also highlighted the ability of lion's mane to improve mood and anxiety symptoms. So just calling this out, research is still kind of figuring out the impact of lion's mane on anxiety. However, you can imagine how mood and anxiety impact cognitive functioning. So if you're feeling super stressed, super down, you may not feel like you are as present at work, or your memory might be impacted. So calling that out here just in the context of talking about lion's mane for cognition. So overall, what we're seeing is lion's mane appears to be really helpful for cognitive health overall. The next mushroom I would like to talk about is reishi. So reishi, we're going to be talking about stress and immunity. And similar to many of the topics we've talked about, there's a lot of overlap between stress and your immune system. So starting with those animal studies, preclinical research has highlighted reishi's anxiolytic and antidepressant effects in both mice and rats. So helping with anxiety and depressive symptoms as they are present in rodents. Specifically, reishi polysaccharides have been shown to increase the growth and activity of cells that help with the immune response. So this is switching to talking about that immunity piece a little bit. So it helps initiate the immune response, support the growth of other cells that carry out the actual immune response, and improve the immune system response in general. So overall, these polysaccharides seem to be really beneficial for the immune system. And then when we turn this all to human research, studies have found that reishi supplementation improves general well-being and fatigue symptoms. And other studies have shown improvements in well-being, quality of life, anxiety, and depressive symptoms. So it's seeming that reishi is helping with that general sense of well-being while helping manage stress more effectively. And similar to preclinical studies, when we're talking about the immune system, clinical studies, so studies done in humans, have shown the impact of reishi extract on immune system function. So I won't get into the details of all the mechanisms, but just broadly speaking, reishi does seem to help with stress and then that immune system functioning. And then the last one we'll talk about today, the last mushroom we'll talk about is Cordyceps sinensis. So before I get going, I do want to just highlight that there are 2 species of cordyceps that are frequently talked about and that are seen when you're looking across different products. So the first is Cordyceps militaris, which is seen in many commercially available products, and then Cordyceps sinensis, which is what is in Charlotte's Web product. So sinensis is parasitic, and it basically colonizes on moth larvae until the inner body is filled with that mycelium. So thinking back to sort of like the roots of the mushroom. Naturally occurring, it is very expensive. It's hard to obtain for very obvious reasons. So what researchers have done is created a standardized fermented product that has been isolated from the wild sinensis and has been developed for research and commercial use. It's much cheaper to obtain because it's been crafted and standardized in the research lab. So sinensis, and the reason that it's in our product is because it gained popularity after the Chinese female running team set world records in the 93 Olympics. So this team came sort of out of nowhere and was setting all of these records and performing super amazingly. And they attributed their success to taking cordyceps sinensis. So turning that bit of lore and thinking about the research behind it, let's walk through the animal studies. So sinensis has been shown to induce vasodilation and vasorelaxation, which can help exercise performance. So the widening and relaxation of your blood vessels while you're working out to get those key nutrients and oxygen to your muscles while you're working out and exercising. Sinensis administration in mice has resulted in improved endurance in swimming tests. So again, thinking about those vasodilatory properties and how that may be helping with endurance. And then also improvements in other biological activities have been noted. So things like upregulation of metabolic regulators, improved glucose and lactate uptake, all of these kind of essential processes that help with endurance. So these have all been shown with sinensis supplementation in these rodent models. So again, translating to humans, what does that mean? Sinensis ingestion, if it was taken before exercise, resulted in fewer markers of exercise-induced muscle damage in one study. So basically what that means is if they're taking it before they work out, they are their bodies are kind of withstanding exercise more effectively. And you're seeing less muscle damage if you are taking sinensis compared to placebo. In another study, sinensis ingestion resulted in improvements in aerobic and endurance performance in the context of running in sedentary but healthy men. So these are not pro athletes or anything like that. They are just kind of people who are trying to get healthy and doing different types of running. So in this context, what we are seeing is better efficiency, improved energy, and reduced fatigue. So overall, just like performing better. And then finally, improvements in metabolic and ventilatory thresholds have also been observed when people are taking sinensis. So again, key pieces that benefit endurance have been shown in humans as well. So let's chat about mushroom safety really quickly. So all of this information, I've looked at research studies and then also pulled from something called the Natural Medicines Database. So this is a comprehensive reference resource that provides reliable information about dietary supplement ingredients. So what NatMed does is they use standardized ratings to measure safety. So there's likely safe, possibly unsafe, likely unsafe, and unsafe. All of these ratings are based on the amount and quality of clinical evidence. So many times things are marked as possibly safe instead of likely safe just because there hasn't been enough research to definitively talk about safety yet. That is a quick overview if anyone is interested. There is a list of specific criteria for those ratings, and you can find that online when you're looking at the NatMed database. So lion's mane has been marked as possibly safe when it's used orally and appropriately. Studies have examined high doses up to 3.2 grams for 12 weeks. And then in preclinical studies, we're not seeing toxicity, morbidity, or mortality even at high doses, and not seeing any cytotoxic effects. So overall, seeming like lion's mane is safe. However, we need a few more studies, well, probably many more studies to say definitively that it is likely safe. Reishi is also marked as possibly safe when an extract is used orally and appropriately. Studies have examined high doses up to 5.4 grams daily, and preclinical studies have not shown any toxicity. Cordyceps, specifically sinensis, has been shown to be possibly safe when used orally and appropriately. And in preclinical studies, again, we're not seeing any issues with toxicity, morbidity, or mortality. So overall, taking functional mushrooms in a way that is considered appropriate and at reasonable doses appears to be safe. So now I want to turn to talking a little bit more about Charlotte's Web products. And before I get to these next couple of slides, just to try to cut down on the overwhelm, I created icons for reference. So if you see one leaf, that is a cannabinoid isolate. And remember, that means everything else has been filtered out. It is just that cannabinoid in isolation. Broad spectrum has 2 leaves, and that means almost everything that you would find in the hemp plant except for THC. And then full spectrum has the 3 leaves, and that means everything you would find in the hemp plant, including THC. And then finally, we have a mushroom icon for our mushroom products. So here is a table that includes all of our gummies available through Charlotte's Web. And I've categorized them based on need state. So we have gummies for general wellness, for focus and cognition, for stress management, energy and performance, muscle recovery, and sleep. And you'll see here we have a variety of options when you look across this portfolio that include full spectrum options, broad spectrum isolate, and mushrooms. So this is more as a reference for you all, just to have an idea of how to walk through these different products specifically. So looking to our oils and capsules, we also have a number of oils, and basically they all fall under what we consider a general wellness category. So we have our original formula, which has 50 milligrams of full spectrum CBD, and we have 60 milligram, 17 milligram, and THC-free options. So our THC-free oil is a broad spectrum CBD, and it has been third-party lab tested to confirm that it contains non-detectable amounts of THC. So again, here we have the key at the bottom to kind of help guide you. And then what you all are probably most interested in, we have our CBD clinic topicals, and all of these are geared towards pain relief. So we have our level 4 ointment, level 5 ointment, level 5 oil, the Pro Pain Stick, Relax massage cream, and unscented massage cream. So when we're looking across options here, level 4 and 5, the big difference is the CBD amount in each of these products, as well as the amount of menthol and camphor. So level 5 has 16% menthol compared to 7% with level 4, so on and so forth. The Pro Pain Stick also has 16% menthol and 11% camphor, so very similar to that level 5 ointment. And then we have our massage creams that have either a little bit of camphor in it in our Relax, or nothing beyond CBD in the unscented version. So now to get to the big question that you all are probably still wondering about is CBD or mushroom. Because we covered a lot of research today, and there seems to be a lot of overlap for the potential uses. So like helping for stress, CBD and mushrooms may help with stress. They may help with sleep. So how do you make those decisions and whether to talk to someone about CBD or mushroom product? So I'm using our gummies here just as a quick example to walk you through questions to ask or questions to consider. So if you are a practitioner, you can ask some key questions to your client or your patient. So is your client open to cannabinoids? That's kind of question 1. How do they feel about hemp? Are they okay with any detectable amounts of THC, even if it's in a very small amount? Is that something they want to stay away from? That can help guide you to considering full spectrum versus broad spectrum versus isolate, depending on what you're looking at. Another really important question is, depending on what state you're in, what are the state regulations that the patient resides in? Are certain products even accessible to them? So thinking about that piece is another initial step when you're trying to make this decision. Another question is, what are you trying to target? And is there a distinction in the need states? So thinking about this, I'll call our sleep gummies and those 3 different gummies we have as an example. So we have our sleep gummy, our stay asleep gummy, and our rest gummy. Our sleep gummy has 10 milligrams of full spectrum CBD and 3 milligrams of melatonin. Our stay asleep gummy has 20 milligrams of cannabinol or CBN, which is a different minor cannabinoid. Rest has 25 milligrams of broad spectrum CBD and 250 milligrams of passion flower. So key differentiators to think about here. If someone likes melatonin, some people really dislike it. That's an important question for that sleep gummy in particular. Also thinking about what are you trying to target specifically. So if they're having trouble falling asleep, that sleep gummy will be helpful. If it's not so much the falling asleep piece, but it's the waking up a bunch and staring at the ceiling in the middle of the night, that's where stay asleep can be very helpful because CBN has been shown in research studies to reduce the amount of times that you're waking up throughout the night. And then finally, if it's more about just getting like a solid night's sleep, helping with like total sleep time, that's where a rest gummy may be beneficial because passion flower has been shown to help with total sleep time in research studies. So again, that question is not only kind of broadly, what are you targeting sleep, but what aspects of sleep are you targeting? And that can help guide that decision-making process. Another question is, does timing matter? So are you looking for something that's like an immediate onset, or is it more just kind of long-term support over time? So for this example, I'll turn to our focus and cognition gummies. We have focus and attention, which is 25 milligrams of CBG, 120 milligrams of ginkgo, compared to our brain support gummies, which have 25 milligrams of broad spec CBD, 1200 milligrams of lion's mane. And then finally, our focus support gummies, which are pure mushroom, 1200 milligrams of lion's mane. So say you've talked about cannabinoids, patients open to that, but you're still trying to figure out which way you want to go. Do I go with the mushroom gummy with lion's mane? Do I lean into the CBG? Which way should I go? So that's where the timing piece is really helpful. So CBG in research studies has been shown to have a more acute onset. So single dose, we're seeing improvements in focus and attention compared to lion's mane, which generally seems to be more longer term support for brain health and cognition. So that can be a deciding factor when you're looking across the focus gummies. And then finally, considering those supporting ingredients. Is there anything within that product that helps guide you to one versus another? So I brought up that issue of melatonin, where some people really are opposed to it or don't like the effects. So that is an important piece to consider. Other people may not like rhodiola. They may find that too stimulating. So maybe you want to steer away from our stress support gummy and turn instead to our calm gummy. So lots of questions to ask. I think really the important piece of this is having that dialogue with your client or with your patient. And if you're on the other side of things, if you are the client or the patient, don't be afraid to ask these questions and ask your practitioner, like, how do I make these decisions? Which way should I go? So with that in mind, would love to open it up to any questions that you all have. I know I talked a lot and covered a ton of research really, really quickly. So really excited to hear what questions you all may have.
Okay, Ivori, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We'll go into some questions. We have just a few. The first one is, in what supplement form, tincture, dried mushroom, fresh, are these mushroom studies?
That is a great question. So I would say all of the above, primarily in tincture or extract. Those are primarily the studies that that I focused on in this presentation. However, there are studies looking at dried mushroom, usually at really high doses though, because you can get much more concentrated effects in those extracts.
Okay, the next question is, how about using reishi on patients with autoimmune diseases such as MS? Those folks are usually leery of anything that affects the immune system. My presumption would be that is adaptogenic, but am I wrong?
So you are not wrong. I would say that it is adaptogenic. However, if they are taking a lot of other medications, I think that would be like my only kind of pause there and just to make sure that there aren't any interactions. So like I mentioned, research in the scientific way is still catching up with traditional medicine in many ways. So we don't have all of the answers. And I would have to look back to see if any studies have been specifically conducted in MS.
Okay, the next one, do all your CBD products contain sunflower oil? I noticed the gummies contain it and I personally have an allergy to it and know others do as well. Any options for a sunflower substitute?
Yeah, so our oils have MCT oil in them, so that is an option. And then I would have to look back across the portfolio. I don't have it quite committed to memory which ones have sunflower versus not, but we definitely have options in our portfolio. Be happy to follow up with that afterwards.
Perfect. And anyone with questions can always email us at marketing@lasaoms.com and we can get those over to Ivori. 2 more questions. Is it safe to take mushrooms or CBD together with Chinese herbal for chronic insomnia?
Oh, interesting. That's a fun question. So annoyingly, I would say, I think, again, as research is catching up, we don't have a clear answer. And my first question would be, what are these other herbal supplements that you are taking? So in general, it's probably okay, but I don't want to say that definitively until we would have to like look more specifically at the herbal supplements they're taking in addition to adding on CBD and reishi or mushrooms in general.
Okay. Is the brain support gummy a safe daily supplement for Alzheimer's patients? Is there any concern with interactions with prescription medications?
That is a great question. So a number of the studies that have been conducted within patients with Alzheimer's. However, I don't know of any studies that have looked at drug interactions. So I don't know if we have the answer to that yet. Although overall, I think the research has shown benefits in that population specifically.
Any cautions for using mushrooms with patients that tested positive for molds and mycotoxins?
Oh, lovely question. I don't know the answer to that. Trying to think through if there would be anything that would kind of trigger because it is a fungus, but I don't know. I'd have to think about that and get back to you.
Okay. And then temp of CBD and mushrooms, hot, warm, etc. Patient's constitution.
Meaning taking these things warmed up versus cold? Is that the question?
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that.
Okay.
We can maybe even take that offline too and see if we can come up with an answer for
Yeah, I would be happy to answer that. Would just need a little bit more context about what you're trying to get at. Usually all of our products are just like at room temperature. You don't need to heat them up. However, I do know, there are like mushroom teas and other things out there. So maybe that's what they're asking.
Yeah. Okay. And then the last question, do the gummies for sleep without melatonin leave the person with morning grogginess?
No, they do not. So actually thinking about that CBN, that stay asleep gummy, they actually asked that question in the research that was conducted and people did not have daytime grogginess. Now, with that being said, there's always individual variants. So I recommend anyone who's trying anything for sleep to do it on a day that is not high consequence. So maybe on the weekend, not when you have an 8 a.m. meeting, just in case. But the CBN gummies do not increase daytime grogginess. And then our rest gummies that have the broad spec CBD and passion flower, similar thing, very low risk of that next day grogginess.
Perfect. Well, that concludes our webinar. Thank you so much, Ivori, and thank you all for joining us today. If we happen to miss any questions, feel free to reach out to us at marketing@lasaoms.com, or if you need anything further from Ivori with your questions, please do the same. And be on the lookout for an email with a promo code, which is CWwebinar725 for reference, and a link to the slides to view the slides. Also, we proudly offer Charlotte's Web CBD and mushroom products on our site, lasaoms.com. And thank you again. Thank you so much, Ivori. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.